Support for Central Florida Public Media comes from JustCallMo.com and attorney Mo DeWitt, proud presenter of WMFE's Engage program. Mo DeWitt is committed to offering legal guidance in personal injury cases, such as car accidents and slip and falls. Offices in Orlando. More at JustCallMo.com. Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Engage is made possible with support from inaugural sponsor JustCallMo.com and the support of listeners like you.
You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up, we'll examine Orange County's suspension on development. Also, we'll look at some of the questionable lessons being taught at a Florida Department of Education teachers workshop. And we'll talk about a new housing program that expands portals to social services. First, though, we are in the peak of wildfire season in Florida, and we are just days away from the start of the Atlantic hurricane season. In light of the dry conditions, new burn bans are in place in parts of our area. A mandatory ban went into effect in Seminole County on Tuesday. One was issued for unincorporated areas of Osceola County just yesterday. These bans prohibit all outdoor burning that includes campfires, fire pits, and burning yard debris. The purpose is to protect property and to protect lives because wildfires can quickly rage out of control. Alan Harris is the emergency manager for Seminole County. He joined Engage earlier today to talk about his concern for residents this time of year and how the infrastructure in the area factors into decision-making. I started the conversation by asking Harris what he saw happening in Seminole County that made the burn ban necessary.
We actually have it in county ordinance that when our drought index gets to 500 and we see that there's no really rain in the forecast, and we've been working with the National Weather Service, the Florida Forest Service, and the local fire departments here in Seminole County to identify what the threat is, what the risk is, and then if we needed to go ahead and act the executive order for the burn ban. It was all decided a couple days ago on Tuesday that it was important for us to go ahead and do this. We had already experienced a few wildfires over the last few weeks. Really, anyone that's walked outside in Seminole County has smelt the wildfires, and not necessarily in our county, but wildfires from even over in Brevard and Volusia County, that the smoke has made its way over here. So we know that wildfires are occurring. Anyone in Central Florida knows they're occurring if they've just walked outside. In Seminole County, we've had a few wildfires that have come close to structures where firefighters were able to save the structures from burning, but they were very close calls. So it's very important for us to go ahead and act this burn ban to prevent any property loss or, of course, injury or life loss. We don't want anyone to lose their life. We don't want anyone to be injured, and we certainly don't want property to be lost here in the county because of wildfires. Right now, it's a tinderbox in the Central Florida area. So just a spark getting on the ground can really light a big fire.
Are wildfires caused by people?
Yeah, so open burning, of course, it causes a lot of wildfires. Campfires can cause wildfires if they're not put out well. That's why we're saying no campfires at all. People burning trash. There are a lot of folks that burn trash. So just a hot ember coming off of that. Flicking a lit cigarette outside of your car can actually catch wildfires, and we see those. If you drive down the road in some of our drier areas and our rural areas, you'll see little patches of black grass. Well, that's a wildfire that had started. It hasn't grown very big, but it started right there, and those are cigarette butts just thrown out of that's how dry it is. It's even so dry that just a week or so ago, a lightning struck, it was in Brevard County, our neighboring county here, but a lightning struck a plot of dry, grassy area and caught fire during the rainstorm. So that's how dry we are right now.
Historically, we're kind of in the peak of wildfire season in Florida, April, May, June. Does that impact your role as emergency manager?
Sure. So we have thresholds for all types of emergency operations center activations and certain activities that are done because of that. One of those, of course, is the drought index. Extreme heat is another one, which activates other plans for extreme heat. Unfortunately, both of those are very, one has already beat the threshold, and that was the burn ban executive order. The other one's getting very, very close. So with heat indexes of 103, 104, it only takes a couple more degrees, and then the extreme heat plan goes into effect. So all of those factors together, of course, can, increase wildfires, but it also can increase fatigue on the folks that have to go out and save homes and save lives, the firefighters that have to go out there, don their bunker gear, their very heavy wood fire protective gear, and try to fight these fires off. And so we want to protect those folks as well as our first responders, that the next call may be a loved one having a heart attack. We want to make sure that they're responding to those things and not completely worn out because they continue to have to fight wildfires. And of course, again, loss of life and injuries and property loss, we want to prevent that here in the Central Florida area, specifically, of course, Seminole County.
And we're talking to Seminole County Emergency Manager Alan Harris. How do you prepare for this wildfire threat? And we have hurricane season officially starting on Saturday as well.
Yeah, so we're doing, of course, things simultaneously. We do a lot of things in emergency management simultaneously because there's multitudes of risks occurring at the same time. What we are encouraging individuals to do is provide the fire service defensible space around your home. If there's brush that comes right up towards the home, limbs that are hanging over the house, cut those back. That's good for hurricanes and that's good for wildfires. If the hurricane comes along, of course, those limbs won't fall on your house. If it's a wildfire, if the fire starts to get up into the treetops, it doesn't come down on the house and burn the roof and, of course, then burn the entire house. So both of those hazards are protected by that simple activity, just cleaning around the home, giving the firefighters defensible space around the home, clearing any limbs, things like that would be over the top of the home.
And as you're preparing, we keep hearing reports about this is expected to be a really potentially busy hurricane season. How does that impact your preparations and what you're doing?
Yeah, I don't really like to look at the numbers a lot. Really, the numbers only tell me that the possibility of having a hurricane is higher. We plan for hurricanes every single year. But a slow hurricane season can bring us a hurricane just as much as a very, very busy hurricane. The likelihood is a little bit higher this year, but we're still going to plan for a hurricane. So we actually are going to be doing a hurricane exercise the day before hurricane season starts, and we'll be doing a full exercise, bringing in all of our partners to the Emergency Operations Center and activating just like we really would with simulated calls coming into the EOC that those individuals have to respond to. So if that includes bringing in temporary staff to help manage a shelter or medical teams, they actually have to go through the whole process of calling the contractor. How many people can you get me? If a hurricane was to hit us, tomorrow, how many people could you actually muster up? And then we want a response back. So that exercise is quite involved. It is a Category 5 hurricane coming in at the Atlantic Ocean at the Brevard-Volusia County line and going right over the Central Florida area. That is our worst case scenario. And we want to plan for the worst case scenario, of course, hoping that never, ever happens. But we want to plan for the worst and then, of course, hope for the best.
If anyone just jumped in the conversation at this point, make it clear. We're just talking about preps.
Yes, just an exercise, an exercise.
And finally, we have so many people moving into the area. So what is your advice to people, been here for a long time and also our newcomers that maybe this is their first season?
Yeah, so develop a disaster plan. Know where you're going to go if you need to evacuate. If you're on the coast, you're definitely going to want to evacuate. Storm surge is a real threat. If you're inland, like here in Seminole County, low-lying areas, mobile home manufactured homes, if you have a special need, a medical need, it's important to register. Even if you're not going to come to the special needs shelter, go ahead and plan for that. Go ahead and register now so that we know that you may come if something happens to your house. Every emergency management office has a special needs registry where we contact the individual. We will provide assistance to the individual to get to an emergency shelter if they need that, and then, of course, check on them afterwards. So very nice program, free of charge, of course. Just feel free to register. Get a kit together, and I never say go get everything all at once, although there will be a tax holiday over the next couple of weeks, so it is a good time to buy some disaster supplies, but each time you go to the grocery store, buy a couple extra items. Each time you go to the hardware store, a couple items that'll help you with your disaster kit. Over time, you'll get a really nice disaster kit together. And then stay informed. All of the emergency management offices here in the Central Florida area, every county has their own alerting system. Register for that alerting system so that you can get informed about what's going on in your county.
Alan Harris is Seminole County's emergency manager. Now, the burn ban is in effect until further notice, so that means no campfires, no fire pits. It is okay to use above-ground charcoal, gas, or electric grills, but county leaders advise avoiding these outdoor cooking methods close to heavily wooded areas. And any person who violates the burn ban can actually be fined up to $500 per violation or face imprisonment for up to 60 days. Just ahead, Orange County has approved a freeze on further development. We'll ask why. And later, a state-sponsored workshop for teachers is raising some eyebrows. If you miss any part of our show today, you can always subscribe to the Engage podcast and listen whenever it's convenient for you. This program will be available on demand at cfpublic.org. That is also where we are streaming live now. I'm Sharon Stone. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, the Florida Department of Education doled out bonuses to teachers who attended a workshop on civics education. And the lesson?
There was a big emphasis, and this is reflected in the slides as well, on dispelling the notion that a separation of church and state exists.
We will talk with the reporter who used the Freedom of Information Act to obtain the workshop's presentation. First, though, a 6-month pause on development began just this week in Orange County. Commissioners unanimously approved the temporary suspension on Tuesday. So this stops Orange County from processing new applications for development projects that would require some kind of change to current zoning maps or plans. It doesn't impact applications already submitted before Tuesday. Some people in the community raised some concerns about this. A developer, Christopher Cameron, spoke at the commission meeting on Tuesday about needing some more time to submit applications for property he recently acquired and the possible impact of the ordinance.
I just got these properties, and I want to turn them into hospice facilities and residential assisted living facilities. But for me to apply, I need at least 2 weeks. So this passing next week on Tuesday, it's not going to work for me. So yeah, this is going to affect a lot of people's employment. So I don't know if we could actually prolong it. If we could actually prolong it, I will have 40 employees. If I can't, it's going to hold it back until October.
The senior planner for Orange County did say staff would be open to working with Christopher Cameron, who you just heard from when he was speaking at the meeting Tuesday. This ordinance pauses development applications so county staff can work on finalizing Vision 2050. That's their long-term plan to manage county growth. The comprehensive plan is currently slated for adoption in September. Orange County Commissioner Emily Bonilla joined Engage to talk about this pause in development and the 2050 overhaul underway.
We have a comprehensive plan that determines how things will be developed in Orange County, and that is a legislative item. So that item dictates future, we have different levels of policies on your land. So let's say you own a 1 acre property, right? you have your future land use map designation, which is one type of category for your property of how you could develop. And then under that, there's a different level that is your zoning. And so that's another separate level of what you can do with your property. And then there's others underneath that as well, which are just depending on what you're doing with your property. So that top level one with the future land use, that is more legislative with that comprehensive plan. And so we're changing that plan right now. We're in the process of changing it. And the way it looks right now, if that plan gets changed to what we're going to call Vision 2050, that's going to be the new name for it, then there will be a sweeping change across the entire county of what that designation will be for your property, including the possible zoning underneath it. So in order to prevent any complications in that whole process, we're putting this pause on any applications to change that designation.
We're talking about one of the fastest growing regions in America. How does the pause in development benefit such a rapidly growing area then?
The way I looked at it, you could say, oh, we're rapidly growing, this is going to stop everything, Well, the process, if someone put in an application, right? And these applications, I'm talking about the applications that were paused. If someone puts in this application, it takes 6 months anyway for that whole process. So this pause is 6 months. At the end of the pause, everyone's land use is going to change anyway to, most of them, a higher density and intensity of use. So for a lot of these people who may have been thinking about putting in the application, they may get what they would have put in the application for anyway in 6 months. For those who don't, then they would have to put in their application at that time. But it's really not pausing anything because it would have taken 6 months anyway. I mean, I'm not delaying anything because it would have taken 6 months anyway.
Were there any kind of red flags or what was happening that made you feel like this pause was necessary?
It's to prevent any complications. Because if we're going through this process of changing all these land uses, and then there's an application that's in that ends up going through at the same time, then it'll be very confusing at the end what the land use will be at that time.
Okay, so the goal of this pause is kind of to reduce confusion about Vision 2050's pending land use changes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What kind of tools does Vision 2050 give Orange County to actually guide that growth?
So it's looking at, separate market areas. So it's separating the county into different sections that will have its own types of uses and zoning. And then taking each of those sections and breaking it down even more into even smaller sections and neighborhoods so that you're really detailed into each of these areas of how they'll look in the future and how they'll be developed. So it's really getting into a more characteristic of what the neighborhood would look like.
And you mentioned that there might be more changes to higher density areas. How does that benefit Orange County's long-term vision?
On that one, I am concerned about because, we definitely are growing, but, there's the conflict, right, between the people who are already living here and the people who will be moving here. And I feel that the priority should go to the people who's already living here. However, if people continue moving in and we don't plan for that, it will hurt the people who are already living here because everything will get more expensive. Because if we don't have the supply to meet the demand, then of course the supply gets more expensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say that with a caveat because we have the supply now, more than enough of it, and things are still getting expensive. But that's a whole other discussion. And that's all based on grade, not supply and demand. But, with Vision 2050, we're trying to make sure that we do have the supply for the future demand. And if we don't, things will just get out of hand. Things will be planned in the way that we don't want it to be planned. It'll put more pressure on neighborhoods that want to keep their character. And so Vision 2050 is supposed to be able to grow in a way that keeps that character, right? So it's trying to balance the people who are here now with the people who are coming. Where I am concerned about the intensities, right, and that increased density is that we don't have the transportation infrastructure for what we have now. Never mind, what's going to be in Vision 2050. So that is one of my biggest concerns. How are we going to make sure that what we're planning for is also planning for that infrastructure? And at the moment, it doesn't really have that. So that's one thing I'm pushing for Vision 2050, that we need to make sure we're planning for everything, including the transportation. It was told to me with the intensities, like it's going to break our roads with what we have today. So we need to plan for, it's only going to work with mass transit, but we don't have a plan for mass transit. We don't have the easements for mass transit. We don't have that worked out. And so with Vision 2050, we need to have that worked out as well. Or if you don't plan, you plan to fail, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't plan for one aspect and not plan for the other, because we're going to fail. And that's where my biggest concerns are.
Does Vision 2050 have to be voted on in September?
It doesn't have to be.
Do you think that this could get pushed back and therefore the pause on development extended as well?
That I couldn't tell you. I will tell you, though, that my priority is to try to get it to a place where I'm comfortable with it by September, so that I could make a decision and vote on it by September. I really don't want it to be delayed, but that's all definitely based on the cooperation between the commissioners working together and staff working together with the commissioners, and working together with the citizens and residents to make sure it's a document that we all could be proud of by September.
We're talking with Orange County Commissioner Emily Bonilla. Is there anything that you can share with us about what you would like to see change within Vision 2050, maybe to address some of the concerns you brought up, like long-term transportation needs?
Yeah, so I definitely feel that our Vision 2050 should include those easements for future mass transit. I actually just sent an email to the board with an article about flying cars. And so there's pressure on the FAA to get the regulations for flying vehicles, to be able to move people in the air. And, the technology is there, but we don't have the regulations to be able to implement it, right? So if that's our future, and FAA is really looking forward to changing those regulations by 2027, we need a plan for that here in Orange County in our Vision 2050, because they also had mentioned that we need to have the infrastructure and the locations for these vehicles to be able to land and take off. So if we don't prepare for that now and plan for it, we may not have the space or the land available for those technologies in the future, which really can, help our transportation issues. So, it's looking at those possible future innovations in our Vision 2050 as well, right? And planning for that. So that's one thing. Also, another concern and thing that I want change is that we can't do a whole county-wide rezoning of everything, because what happens is that gives what we call entitlements to a property. And if we entitle a property with higher densities and intensities, and then it's not right for that area, it's not right for the infrastructure, then we can't reverse that. Once we give an entitlement, we can't reverse it. So that's one thing I want change, is that we don't give all these entitlements up front, that they still have to have some application process so that we could have another look at it before it's final for a certain property. Another thing is that Vision 2050 takes away all community engagement, because all the rezoning will happen without them. What I just mentioned before about, not giving that entitlement and having them still apply for it will also provide for the opportunity for the citizens to be able to say, hey, this is not really a good idea and here's why. So it's, we need to bring back that community engagement into the process.
So we're talking about this long-term 2050 plan, but What if we're in 6 months, the pause has expired? I mean, what do you tell people then who can't afford to live here now?
The affordability Vision 2050 is not going to solve it today. The affordability problems and issues that we're having right now is not because of inventory, it's because of not having affordable inventory. We have the inventory, just don't have affordable inventory. And I don't see that being solved anytime soon without some aggressive changes with the board and the mentality towards it. We have to, if we really want to solve it, the county has to start owning the problem by owning affordable housing units. And because the developers out there, they're not going to do it. It's not profitable for them to do affordable housing. So the county needs to do it and needs to create these and, work with the housing authority probably to run them and stuff like that. That's the only way that the affordability is going to be solved.
Emily Bonilla is the District 5 Commissioner for Orange County. A little over a year ago, Governor Ron DeSantis held a ceremony commemorating the first 4,500 teachers to complete a 50-hour civics course. The teachers were incentivized to attend with a $3,000 bonus and the Civics Seal of Excellence endorsement. The course was sponsored by the Florida Department of Education, but
what they've done is brought in instructors to give various components of the presentation. And many of those are actually college professors at private religious institutions mostly from outside of Florida.
That was Judd Legum, the founder and lead reporter of Popular Information, the newsletter dedicated to accountability journalism. Legum heard some rumblings that the workshop included overt references to Christian nationalism and quotes from characters associated with that end of the political spectrum. Christian nationalism is a political and religious theory that says the U.S. is divinely destined to be a nation led by Christians of European extraction. Supporters cite scripture and quotes from the Founding Fathers to justify their position. The idea was once held by racist organizations existing on the fringe. Think KKK, Aryan Nation. Well, today, the belief has become widely spread and gaining momentum and roots in some of the mainstream conservative America circles. He used the Freedom of Information Act to obtain the slides used in the civics workshop, and he joined Engage to describe what he found.
So the slides that I received, and I got them through a group called the Florida Freedom to Read Project, which follows a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests in Florida, were the basis for the in-person training that was given throughout the state of Florida in the summer of 2023. And what stuck out to me was a particular section that focused on the political influences of the Founding Fathers and also the influences really into the whole structure of the United States government. And it stuck out for me just because how much emphasis was placed on what they term the Judeo-Christian influences on the founding and the integration of religious content, including directly quoting scripture and directly quoting individuals who were pushing what I think, at least according to the experts I talked to, were some of the core tenets of Christian nationalism.
So what was the purpose of this project? Were the teachers supposed to take this back into their classrooms?
Yeah, I mean, this was instruction for the teachers to prepare them to teach civics, which my understanding is that primarily 7th and 10th grade in the state of Florida, but there were teachers of, for all age groups. A lot of teachers just wanted to get into this, as I was saying, because of the money, maybe. But I think that there were a lot of civics teachers there, and this was supposed to provide guidance as to how you would cover these subjects. And there are corollaries to this within the official standards that the teachers must meet. So there is a standard in Florida social studies, civics education that says you should discuss the Judeo-Christian influences on the founders. And then what this slide presentation does for the people who attended is give, expand upon that and talk about what they mean in some detail about that concept. And it's supposedly an enrichment for the teachers, so they get a special commendation of excellence added to their teaching certificate if they undergo this kind of training.
So teachers are taking advantage of what they believe is training for some extra money that they could use in the classroom. And you spoke with an educator who attended one of these civics training sessions in 2022 and 23. Tell us what middle school teacher Mindy Washington told you.
Yeah, Mindy Washington was quite disturbed by what she observed both at the 2023 training, and I think she had been previous years as well. She told me that during one of the sessions that she attended, two of the instructors brought out King James Bibles to illustrate some of the points they were trying to make. She told me that there was a big emphasis, and this is reflected in the slides as well, on dispelling the notion that a separation of church and state exists, which is something that you will hear from Christian nationalists, but is generally rejected by most scholars as how to interpret the Establishment Clause. And expanding on that and saying that, essentially that the founders, because they were Congregationalists, they wanted religion integrated in with the government. And, a lot of this is ahistorical, but it represents a very particular worldview. I think what Mindy Washington told me is that she didn't bring any of these concepts really into her classroom because she was essentially horrified by it. But she thinks that especially for many teachers who may hold these views, that it emboldened them to bring religion into the classroom. And she believes that that was the outcome, that there were people there who were very receptive to this message. And she thinks that it has had an impact in certain classrooms.
We are talking to Judd Legum. He is the founder and investigative reporter with Popular Information. That's an independent newsletter dedicated to accountability journalism. Did you speak to other teachers as well?
I spoke to another teacher who did not attend the in-person training, but attended the online training, which was about 50 hours. Now, that teacher chose to remain anonymous because the teacher is still a teacher and is concerned that speaking out could lead to professional repercussions for the teacher. So what that teacher told me was very similar things. We don't have slides for this because these were video presentations, but what the teacher said was that there was an emphasis and a focus on the idea that it was the 10 Commandments that form the foundation for the law of the United States. And a lot of the presenters, again, were from outside the state, very conservative colleges, particularly several from Hillsdale College, which is kind of notorious for its efforts that they have a whole K through 12 curriculum to inject conservative and more specifically conservative Christian ideology into K through 12 education. So as part of this online class, teachers would sit through hours of lectures by Hillsdale professors on the role of religion in government.
The content that we're talking about, it quotes many famous statesmen, philosophers, Aristotle, George Washington, and Peter Lilback. Who is he?
Peter Lilback is a Sumerian. He's not a traditional academic. He also runs a group called the Providence Foundation, which is a group that essentially promotes a lot of the concepts that are behind Christian nationalism. I don't know if he would self-identify as a Christian nationalist, but there are articles on the Providence Forum website talking about how Christian nationalism itself, or even the term, is a smear, and actually the things that they're accusing Christian nationalists of saying are really just true. So he is not someone who would be widely quoted as a scholar of the founders. He did write a 1,200-page book on George Washington's religion, but it was essentially self-published by the organization that he runs. And it's sort of indicative of taking kind of fringe figures and now presenting this as this is something that we're now going to instruct the teachers of Florida to take back to the classroom for them.
Did you get any response from the Florida Department of Education?
I did contact the Florida Department of Education, specifically the two trainers who gave this presentation. I gave them a few days to see if I could get a response, and didn't hear anything back at all. So nothing really.
Are there other takeaways from the investigation?
The one other thing I would just say is that this is part of a broader effort under the Trump administration. There was a commission formed, the 1776 Commission, that was designed to kind of create an alternative conservative narrative of history. And actually, the executive director of that commission is one of the instructors in this Florida training, in the Florida online training. So this is a specific thing happening right now in Florida, but it's part of a much broader effort that, should Trump become our next president, you may be hearing more about, because it's definitely something that lots of people, particularly on the right, are interested in.
Judd Legum is the founder of and lead reporter with Popular Information. And right after we spoke with him yesterday, he released some more slides from the state's civics instruction for educators that included slides instructing public school teachers to link cancel culture to the genocides perpetrated by Joseph Stalin. Well, the new batch of slides acquired by Legum also includes lessons on a pair of conservative college professors who had been terminated by their institutions for inappropriate social media postings. We should note neither of the professors taught in Florida. Coming up, a new community center in Eatonville is providing affordable housing and so much more. We'll talk with a voice from Ability Housing about the Wayne Dench Apartments Community Center. Just a reminder, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about. Send us an email to engage@cfpublic.org. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Just in the last hour, a new community center opened in Orlando. The Wayne Dench Apartments Community Center is on West Kennedy Boulevard in Eatonville. Plans for this property have really transitioned since the idea was first brought up several years ago. One purpose of the project is to serve families at risk of homelessness in Orange County. The center features office space for residents to meet with case managers, a library, computer lab, and laundry facilities. Advent Health University and its Hope Clinic will also utilize this space. Ability Housing partnered with Advent Health to host a celebration this afternoon to mark the occasion. Shannon Nasworth is the president and CEO of Ability Housing. She joined Engage this afternoon to share the vision for the center to support the needs of the Central Florida community.
We're going to be having the grand opening for the community center here at the Wayne Dench Apartments. We, in partnership with Advent Health and Wayne Dench Charities, had transformed a highly dilapidated transitional housing program into a high-quality apartment community. But the scope of rehab was so extreme, we had to pull the community center out of the scope of work for the rehab. But through the support of the county and Representative Demings, we were able to build this community center. And today we are finally crossing the finish line on this project. And the residents will have this beautiful space in which to do workshops and classes and movie nights and the like.
Tell me more about who you're expecting at this celebration today.
Well, today Mayor Demings will be coming, as well as Val Demings, Representative Demings, because those were very integral into making this project possible. As I mentioned, we had, the scope of the rehab of the original project, the community center got pulled very rapidly. We just didn't have the funds to build it. But they knew how important it was to have a community center so that our case managers could have offices. There'd be a computer lab and library, space for trainings and workshops, as well as community events. It is really what becomes the heart of this community.
I want to talk more about what kind of issues, projects your case managers are working on, and also just tell me more about the center itself, please.
Absolutely. So Wayne Dench Apartments is primarily permanent supportive housing. We've helped individuals who are homeless for a long time move off the streets, have a permanent place to live, but frequently they need some supports to maintain that housing. And that's the type of case managers we have. We have supportive housing case managers. We also have certified peer support specialists as well. And really what our case managers do is help the residents determine what their goal is, develop a plan to achieve that goal, and then help them implement that plan. But really empowering them to be the implementer of the plan. We're just here as a resource if they need assistance.
Is this community center something for the entire community?
It's not for the entire community. However, we do open it up for everyone for certain events and things like that. And if we're having any trainings, workshops, any kind of community meetings, we will open the doors for everyone. But it isn't something someone off the street could just walk into at any moment.
Tell me about why Eatonville, right in the heart of Orlando, was the right location for this.
Well, as I said, this was a rehab of an existing property. So the transitional housing program that was located here before had been here for decades, and the buildings were rapidly deteriorating. Many units were not habitable any longer. We were approached and asked to partner with Advent Health to take those dilapidated buildings and turn them into quality housing, which we were able to do and we're very excited by.
And speaking of Advent Health, can you tell us a bit more about just that partnership and what Advent Health is also planning to bring to the community with this new center?
Yes, absolutely. So Advent Health was integral in saving the buildings that are here. They had the relationship with Wayne Dench Charities, so they were kind of a conduit for us getting control of this site so that we could do the rehab and create the housing. They also contributed financially to the repairs because, as I said, the rehab scope was far beyond what anyone projected. In addition, their Advent University students come here every week and work with the residents doing occupational therapy and other types of training. So it's training for the students, but it's also services for the residents, and they've really developed a wonderful bond.
We're talking to Shannon Nasworth. She is the president and CEO of Ability Housing. What do you think this brings to the Central Florida community that wasn't there before this opened?
Well, what it does is it finalizes a very important project. If we had not been able to transform this transitional housing into the housing it is now, the people that had been living here would have become homeless. There was nowhere for them to go. So it was really critical that we take the housing, turn it into something that was quality, that the people deserve, that the neighborhood deserves. And if we hadn't been able to accomplish that, those households, with great vulnerabilities would have become homeless again. And of course, no one in Orlando wants anyone to become homeless again. We're fighting very hard to reduce the number of homeless. What this community center does is it's the cherry on top of the sundae of finally finishing the project, because the residents and the support providers really need a space like this for everyone to thrive.
And Shannon, how are you feeling? It sounds like this is something you've been working on for a long time, and we're finally getting to that finish line. How are you feeling?
Very excited and very relieved. This is something that we at Advent Health first started talking about, I think, in 2016.
Wow.
The rehab started, I think it was in 2018, the actual rehab started. It was a very expensive rehab, took a long time to complete because they were occupied units. And then we had to raise the funds. And again, God bless Representative Demings and Mayor Demings for stepping up and making sure we had the resources we need to make this community center possible. This is the culmination of many years of very hard work by an awful lot of people, and it's wonderful to finally be crossing this finish line.
And what is next for the center? What is the next project you think you will be doing with this?
So with this project, we'll just be doing routine daily operations of the apartment community and providing the services on the property. Our next endeavor in the Orlando area is we were just awarded funding from the state to construct a new construction property in the city of Orlando. So we just got that notification, so we're in the infancy stages, but we will be working with the city and the state to go through the underwriting and start construction in about a year.
Do you have similar goals for that property as the one opening in Eatonville today?
Yes, we always try to have community centers and communal spaces for the residents, as well as spaces for support services and property management, et cetera. So again, normally it's part of a new construction project. You just have it in the plans. It had been originally intended here to also be in place, but it just had to be pulled from the scope of the budget.
And what else would you like our audience to understand about what you're doing in this community, either long-term in Orlando or maybe just today in Eatonville as well?
I guess I'd just like to let the community know that Ability Housing has been committed to the Orlando community for many years now. This is the property today is our third property in Central Florida, and then the new one we're going to start will be our fourth. And we really appreciate all the partnership and support the community has given us. And we look forward to working with the community as we all work collectively to end homelessness in our community.
Do you think that your agency meets a need in a unique way that others don't?
We were asked to expand to Central Florida because of the housing we provide. We're a nationally recognized affordable and supportive housing provider. We are the only organization in the state of Florida to be gold certified by the National Corporation for Supportive Housing. We got gold standards in every 7 dimensions of quality at every single one of our multifamily properties. No other agency in Florida has done that, and that's what we bring to the Central Florida community, is the ability to get the resources to build the housing, but also the expertise to make sure the residents have the services they need to thrive. 97% of our residents retain stable housing.
Shannon Nasworth is the president and CEO of Ability Housing. That is all for today's edition of Engage. We will be back Tuesday at 3 o'clock. All of our shows are available on demand at cfpublic.org. Thank you for joining us. I'm Sharon Stone. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.